I'm Ruby, 28 years old, and the proud owner of Sweet Reverie Bakery Café in downtown. 2 years ago, I opened these doors with nothing but hope and my grandmother's recipes. Not a single family member showed up for my grand opening. Now my little bakery is about to be featured in Urban Taste magazine, while my successful brother suddenly wants a piece of the pie. Funny how tables turn when you follow your heart instead of others' expectations. If you're watching this, drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from, hit that like button, and subscribe to join me on this journey of sweet revenge through pastries. Growing up in a middle-class suburban neighborhood, my childhood was comfortable, but always overshadowed by expectations. My father worked as a financial director for a corporate firm, bringing home not just a steady paycheck, but a rigid definition of success. My mother taught high school English, valuing academic achievements above all else. Our modest two-story home was filled with trophies and certificates, almost all belonging to my brother James. James was 5 years older, the golden child whose academic brilliance made our parents beam with pride. National Merit Scholar, valedictorian, and eventually accepted to an Ivy League business school. Family gatherings invariably turned into James appreciation ceremonies, with relatives asking about his latest accomplishments, while I sat quietly nibbling on desserts. Those desserts became my escape. When I was 7, my grandmother Sarah began teaching me to bake. Unlike my parents, Nana Sarah saw something special in the way I meticulously measured ingredients and delighted in creating something from scratch. "Ruby," she'd say, flour dusting her wrinkled hands. "Some people build empires with numbers and suits, others build them with sugar and butter. Neither is better, just different paths to leaving your mark." Saturday mornings at Nana's house became sacred. While other kids watched cartoons, I learnt the secrets of perfect pie crust and how to tell when bread was proofed just right. Her kitchen was modest, but magical, smelling of vanilla and cinnamon, with sunlight streaming through yellow curtains. Each recipe came with a story from her own life, making every dish we created together feel like a piece of living history. For my 12th birthday, Nana gave me my own recipe journal bound in red leather. "Start filling this with your own creations," she encouraged. "Someday someone else might treasure your recipes the way I treasure my grandmother's." When I was 16, Nana Sarah was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The disease moved quickly, giving us only 3 months to say goodbye. During one of my last visits, she made me promise 2 things: to never abandon my passion for baking and to someday use it to make others happy. After her funeral, I learnt she had left me her handwritten recipe book and $5,000 in a savings account. "For your dream," the accompanying note said, "whatever shape it takes." My parents suggested investing the money for college, but I knew Nana had other intentions. I started working at a local bakery after school, learning the commercial side of the business while secretly planning my future. The owner, Mrs. Garcia, recognized my dedication and gradually increased my responsibilities from dishwasher to assistant baker. When college application season arrived, James had already graduated from his prestigious business school and landed a job at Fisher & Morgan Financial. The comparisons became unbearable. "Harvard has an excellent hospitality program," my mother suggested, clearly hoping I'd aim higher than flour and sugar. "Business school first, then you can think about opening a restaurant if you still want to," my father advised. "You need to understand the financials before jumping into any industry." But I applied to the culinary program at our community college instead. It was affordable, practical, and focused on the hands-on skills I craved. When the acceptance letter arrived, my parents didn't even put it on the refrigerator like they had done with all of James's letters. "It's just that we know you're capable of so much more," Mum said, disappointment evident in her voice. "College is an investment," Dad added. "We just want to make sure you're getting the best return." I moved forward anyway, using Nana's money for tuition and continuing to work at the bakery. While my friends from high school posted pictures from frat parties at state universities, I was learning the science of gluten development and the art of French patisserie. And despite my parents' predictions that I'd come to my senses, I fell more deeply in love with the craft every day. After graduating from culinary school with honors, I landed a position at Bellflower, one of the city's upscale restaurants. The executive chef, Amanda Torres, had built her reputation on innovative desserts that combined traditional techniques with unexpected flavors. Working under her guidance was intimidating at first, but eventually became the advanced education my community college couldn't provide. "Culinary school teaches you rules," Amanda told me during my first week. "Working in a real kitchen teaches you when to break them." Amanda was 35 with a sleeve of tattoos and a reputation for brutal honesty. Unlike the gentle encouragement from Nana Sarah, Amanda's mentorship came through tough love and uncompromising standards. 3 times she made me remake a chocolate souffle because the rise wasn't perfect. When I finally got it right, her only acknowledgement was a brief nod. "You're not just making dessert," she explained later. "You're creating the last impression a customer takes home. Make it memorable." The hours were grueling, often stretching from noon until after midnight. My social life dwindled to occasional Sunday brunches with culinary school friends who understood why I couldn't stay out late. Dating became nearly impossible, but watching diners close their eyes in pleasure at first bite of my desserts made every sacrifice worthwhile. While my skills grew at Bellflower, James was climbing the corporate ladder at Fisher & Morgan. My parents created a shrine to his success in our family room, prominently displaying photos of him shaking hands with the company CEO and newspaper clippings about the firm's latest acquisitions. When they mentioned my job, it was always as Ruby's cooking thing or that restaurant job. After 2 years at Bellflower, Amanda started giving me creative control over the dessert menu one night per week. The Baker's Tuesday special became popular enough that regulars requested my creations specifically. I began to compile a mental list of signatures for the bakery I still dreamed of opening someday. When James completed his MBA from Wharton, our parents threw an extravagant graduation party. They rented a private room at the city's most exclusive golf club, invited everyone from extended family to my father's business associates, and commissioned a professionally designed cake featuring the Wharton crest. "Would you like me to make something for the party?" I offered, hoping to contribute in my own way. "Oh, honey, that's sweet," my mother replied. "But we've already ordered everything. Maybe bring some cookies for the kids' table." Despite the dismissal, I spent an entire day off creating an assortment of pastries, eclairs filled with bourbon, vanilla cream, tart raspberry Linzer cookies, and miniature pavlovas topped with seasonal fruits. I arranged everything on my best serving platters, carefully transported them to the venue, and set them among the catered appetizers. Throughout the evening, I watched guests devour my offerings, many returning for seconds. But the compliments were directed to my mother, "Wonderful party, Diane. Everything is delicious, you must share your caterer's information." When I was finally acknowledged, it came with qualification. "Ruby works at a restaurant downtown," my father told his golf buddy. "She's still figuring things out." Later that night, as James held court with his business school friends, I overheard my mother talking to her sister. "We're hoping she'll meet someone sensible who can help her get established in something more substantial." As if on cue, my mother introduced me to Mark, one of James's classmates, who had joined a management consulting firm. "Mark is interested in the restaurant industry from the investment perspective." She said, her matchmaking intentions transparent. "Maybe he could give you some advice." The conversation that followed was excruciating. Mark explained restaurant profit margins to me as if I hadn't calculated food costs daily for years. He suggested I consider moving into the corporate side of the food industry, where there was actual money to be made. I excused myself after 10 minutes, retreated to the kitchen, and helped the catering staff clean up. They at least asked interested questions about my work and treated me like a professional. Driving home that night, tears of frustration threatened to spill over. But instead of defeat, I felt a new resolve crystallizing. I would prove my worth not just to my family, but to myself. 4 years into my position at Bellflower, I had saved almost every penny beyond my basic living expenses. Combined with Nana Sarah's inheritance, which had been collecting interest, I had accumulated nearly $60,000. Not enough for a turnkey operation in a prime location, but enough to start something modest if I was clever about it. I spent my rare days off scouting potential locations, researching equipment costs, and refining my business plan. Amanda noticed my distraction during a particularly busy service. "Your head's not in the game today," she observed as we closed the kitchen. "What's going on?" When I confessed my plans to strike out on my own instead of discouragement, Amanda offered practical advice. "Location and rent will make or break you," she warned. "Find a place where the rent won't strangle you while you build clientele." The following Sunday, I gathered my courage and brought up my plans during the monthly family dinner at my parents' house. James was in town for a conference, and I thought having everyone together would make the announcement feel more significant. "I've been saving to open my own bakery," I said during a lull in conversation. "I found a few potential locations and worked out the financials. I'm thinking of moving forward within the next 6 months." The silence that followed felt eternal. My mother set down her fork, exchanging a look with my father that I'd seen many times before, when discussing my unrealistic ambitions. "Sweetheart," she finally said, "do you have any idea how risky small businesses are? Especially restaurants." "It's not a restaurant," I clarified. "It's a bakery cafe. I've done the research. There's a good market for artisanal baked goods in several neighbourhoods I'm looking at." My father chuckled, not unkindly, but with the patronising tone he used when he thought someone was being naive. "Ruby, 90% of restaurants fail within the first year. That's just statistics. I'd hate to see you lose your savings on something so speculative." "I've been working in the industry for 6 years," I countered. "I know what I'm doing." James, who had been scrolling through emails on his phone, finally looked up. "If you've got money burning a hole in your pocket, I could introduce you to our investment team," he offered. "They could help you put that money into something that will actually grow instead of evaporating." "This isn't about maximizing returns," I replied, feeling my cheeks flush with anger. "It's about building something that matters to me." "That's exactly the kind of thinking that keeps people from building real wealth," James retorted. "Sentiment doesn't pay bills." I pushed back from the table, appetite gone. "I'm not asking for permission or financial advice. I was hoping for support." "We do support you," my mother insisted. "We just want you to be realistic." I left dinner early that night, tears blurring the streetlights as I drove to my apartment. Once home, I called Amanda, who listened patiently to my frustrated venting. "Families are complicated," she said when I'd finished, "especially when you choose a path they don't understand. They think I'm throwing my life away on a pipe dream." "Then prove them wrong," Amanda replied simply. "And by the way, I may know someone who can help with location. His name is Daniel. He owns a couple of buildings downtown. The area's a bit rough now, but starting to turn around. Rent would be affordable." Daniel Thompson turned out to be a 40-something property developer with a vision for revitalizing the forgotten corners of downtown. We met at a coffee shop near one of his buildings, a pre-war structure with character but in need of significant updates. "Most of the ground floor spaces need work," he admitted as we toured what would eventually become Sweet Reverie. "But that means I can offer favourable terms to the right tenants who see the potential." The space had previously been a bookstore that had closed 3 years earlier. It had high ceilings, large windows facing east for morning light, and enough square footage for a small kitchen counter area and seating for about 20 customers. The rent was indeed significantly lower than other locations I'd considered, with a 5-year lease option that would protect me from immediate rent hikes if the neighbourhood gentrified. "I believe in this neighbourhood," Daniel explained. "What it needs are businesses with soul that can become community anchors." I signed the lease the following week and began the arduous process of transforming an empty retail space into a functioning bakery. The renovation costs quickly exceeded my initial estimates. Plumbing updates alone ate through $10,000. The vintage hardwood floors I'd hoped to restore proved too damaged, requiring replacement. Commercial kitchen equipment, even bought second-hand, strained my budget further. The permit process became a bureaucratic nightmare of inspections, applications, and fees. Each day brought new challenges, electrical work that wasn't up to code, delivery delays for custom countertops, and contractors who disappeared for days without explanation. I took on extra shifts at Bellflower to supplement my dwindling funds, sometimes working there until midnight, only to go directly to my space and paint walls until dawn. Sleep became a luxury, proper meals even more so. I existed on coffee and adrenaline, held together by the vision of what Sweet Reverie could become. 3 months turned to 4, then 5. My opening date was postponed twice due to inspection delays. Finally, 6 months after signing the lease, Sweet Reverie passed its final health inspection. With opening day set for the following Saturday, I sent handwritten invitations to my family, friends, and former colleagues. "Please join me for the grand opening of Sweet Reverie," the cards read. A dream 15 years in the making. The morning of the grand opening, I arrived at Sweet Reverie at 4 a.m. to begin baking. Despite my exhaustion from the weeks of preparation, adrenaline kept me moving efficiently through my prep list. By 7, the display cases were filled with an assortment of pastries, flaky croissants, delicate fruit tarts, rustic sourdough loaves, and of course, several recipes inherited from Nana Sarah. The space had transformed from a dusty, abandoned storefront into a warm, inviting cafe. Pendant lights hung from the high ceiling, casting a golden glow over reclaimed wood tables. The walls were painted a soft butter yellow, adorned with vintage baking implements and framed recipes in elegant script. Behind the counter, a chalkboard menu detailed the day's offerings in my careful handwriting. At precisely 9, I unlocked the doors. A small line had already formed outside mostly curious neighbours and a few loyal friends who had followed my journey on social media. Amanda arrived with a bouquet of sunflowers her rare day off spent supporting my venture. "It's beautiful, Ruby," she said, surveying the space. "Exactly as you described it." Throughout the morning, a steady stream of customers came through the doors. Many were drawn by the promotional flyers I distributed throughout downtown offices, offering a free coffee with any pastry purchase. Others were simply passing by, lured in by the irresistible scent of freshly baked goods wafting onto the sidewalk. As I rang up purchases and explained the inspiration behind different items, I couldn't help glancing toward the door each time the bell jingled, hoping to see my parents or James. I had called my mother the night before to confirm they had received the invitation. "We'll try to stop by," she had promised vaguely. "Your father has a golf game, but we might come after that." By noon, the initial rush had slowed to a comfortable pace. I took advantage of the lull to check my phone. No messages, no missed calls. I sent a quick text to my mother. "Sweet Reverie is open, lots of happy customers already. Hope to see you soon." The afternoon brought another wave of customers, including Daniel, who proudly proclaimed himself my first regular. "I knew this place would be special," he said, purchasing a cinnamon roll and an almond croissant. As closing time approached, I continued checking the door with diminishing hope. The bell jingled one last time at 5:30, but it was only a college student looking for a study spot. Disappointed to learn, we were closing in 30 minutes. By 6:15, I had counted the register, cleaned the equipment, and prepared dough for the next morning. The opening day had been objectively successful, with sales exceeding my conservative projections and several customers promising to return. Yet as I locked the door behind me, a profound sense of emptiness settled in my chest. Not one family member had shown up. Not even a text message with an excuse. The 3-block walk to my apartment felt interminable. Once inside, I kicked off my flour-dusted shoes and collapsed onto the sofa, too exhausted to even shower. That's when the tears finally came hot and relentless. I cried for the excitement I couldn't share, for the congratulations I'd longed to hear, for the validation I still desperately wanted, despite my best efforts to move beyond it. My phone rang, startling me from my misery. For a moment, I thought it might be my mother finally calling with an apology. Instead, Amanda's name flashed on the screen. "How are you holding up?" she asked without preamble. "They didn't come," I said, my voice small. "Not one of them." Amanda's sigh carried years of her own disappointments. "I'd say I'm surprised, but we both know I'd be lying." "I shouldn't care this much." "But you do, and that's normal," she assured me. "Look, I've seen enough chefs rise and fall to know one thing for certain: success is the best revenge. Build something so undeniably excellent that they can't ignore it. Make them regret not being there from the beginning." After hanging up, I dragged myself to the shower, letting hot water wash away tears and flour residue alike. As steam filled the small bathroom, Amanda's words echoed in my mind. "Success is the best revenge." Fine, I thought, my resolve hardening like caramel under heat. If my family needed proof of my worth beyond what I'd already demonstrated, I would give them a success so spectacular they would choke on their dismissal. I would pour every ounce of creativity, every gram of passion, and every minute of my waking hours into making Sweet Reverie not just survive, but thrive. The reality of running a small business quickly tempered my ambitious vow of spectacular success. The first 3 months of operation brought challenges I hadn't fully anticipated, despite my years in the industry. The early morning baking schedule left me perpetually exhausted. Managing inventory, ordering supplies, handling bookkeeping, and addressing customer concerns consumed whatever energy remained after production. Financial pressure mounted as startup costs continued to exceed projections. I hadn't factored in the expensive repair when the second-hand refrigerator failed, or the higher-than-expected utility bills for running commercial ovens. By month 2, I was taking only a minimal draw for personal expenses, pouring everything back into keeping Sweet Reverie afloat. Customer traffic remained sporadic. Weekends brought decent crowds, but weekday mornings could be discoringly quiet. Downtown's revitalization was happening, but slowly. Many nearby storefronts remained vacant, limiting foot traffic. The neighborhood's reputation as up-and-coming meant many suburban dwellers still hesitated to venture downtown, especially for something as simple as coffee and pastry. In those quiet mornings, doubts crept in. Maybe my father had been right about failure statistics. Maybe James's investment advice had been sound. Maybe my mother's concern was justified. Then a Tuesday morning regular named Marcus, who always ordered a black coffee and an almond croissant, requested something special for his mother's birthday. "She loves berries and anything not too sweet," he explained. "Could you make something that would remind her of picking blackberries as a kid?" The request sparked a memory of Nana Sarah describing summers spent gathering wild berries with her sisters. I remembered a recipe from her collection that I hadn't yet tried at the bakery, a simple butter cake infused with lemon zest and topped with fresh blackberries that sank into the batter as it baked, creating pockets of intense flavour. I made it the following day, adding my own twist with a brush of honey lemon glaze, while still warm, and a side of barely sweetened whipped cream. When Marcus picked it up, I included a handwritten note explaining the inspiration. 3 days later, he returned with his mother, who insisted on meeting the baker. Her eyes filled with tears as she described how the cake had transported her back to childhood. "This wasn't just dessert," she said, gripping my flour-dusted hands. "It was a memory I could taste." That interaction changed something fundamental in my approach. I began creating what I called Memory Lane Specials desserts designed to evoke specific nostalgic experiences. A brown butter rice pudding with cinnamon recalled winter evenings by the fireplace. Apple hand pies with salted caramel mimicked county fair treats. Lavender shortbread transported customers to garden picnics. Each Memory Lane special came with a short story about its inspiration printed on cards next to the display. Customers began sharing their own memories triggered by certain flavors, creating a community conversation around food and nostalgia. Gradually, a loyal customer base developed. People began traveling from other neighborhoods specifically for my creations. A local office manager started ordering weekly pastry boxes for meetings. A book club requested to hold their monthly gatherings at Sweet Reverie, appreciating the quiet atmosphere on Tuesday evenings. I expanded beyond pastries, offering simple lunch options that complemented the bakery's focus: seasonal soups, artisanal grilled cheese sandwiches, and hearty salads. This broadened our appeal and increased afternoon revenue. To manage the growing workload, I hired Lisa, a culinary student working her way through school just as I had done. She reminded me of myself, intense, detail-oriented, and genuinely passionate about baking. Training her allowed me to occasionally sleep past 3 a.m., a luxury I hadn't experienced since opening. 8 months after our grand opening, downtown's renaissance accelerated. A boutique clothing shop opened across the street. An independent bookstore set up 2 doors down. A tech startup leased office space in the building's 2nd floor. Daniel's vision for the neighborhood was materializing, bringing increased foot traffic and visibility. One unusually busy Thursday afternoon, a woman with a camera lingered after ordering, observing the cafe with professional interest. When the rush subsided, she introduced herself as Sophia Alvarez, food writer for Urban Taste magazine. "I've been hearing about your Memory Lane concept," she explained. "It's a unique approach in a market saturated with copycat bakeries." Sophia ordered one of everything on the Memory Lane menu, taking notes and photographs as she sampled each item. She asked detailed questions about my background, inspiration, and journey to opening Sweet Reverie. I found myself sharing the full story, including my family's absence at the grand opening. "So this is truly a solo venture," she clarified, seemingly impressed. "No family backing or business partners. Just me, my grandmother's recipes, and a lot of stubborn determination," I confirmed. 2 weeks later, Sophia's article appeared in Urban Taste, featuring Sweet Reverie as the cover story. The headline read, "Baking Memories: How Sweet Reverie is Redefining Dessert Downtown." The 4-page spread included sumptuous photographs of the space and my creations, alongside a deeply personal profile that portrayed me as a determined entrepreneur who had succeeded against the odds. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. The morning the magazine hit newsstands, a line formed outside Sweet Reverie before opening. By noon, we had sold out of everything, forcing me to close early and spend the afternoon baking for the next day. Local television stations requested interviews. Food bloggers appeared with cameras and notebooks. My social media followers multiplied overnight. The most surprising response came via text message from my father. "Saw your article. We should formalize the family business relationship. Let's talk about expansion opportunities." No congratulations, no acknowledgement of achievement, just a sudden interest in capitalizing on my success. I stared at the message for a long time before setting my phone aside without replying, losing myself instead in the familiar rhythm of mixing dough for tomorrow's offerings. The week following the Urban Taste feature brought not only unprecedented business, but also a flood of communication from my suddenly interested family. After my father's text came a voicemail from my mother. "Ruby darling, we're so proud of you. Everyone at the club is talking about the magazine article. Call me back when you can." Proud now that others had validated my work, I noted bitterly. The irony wasn't lost on me that the family who couldn't spare an hour for my grand opening was now eager to associate with my success. I deliberately delayed responding, focusing instead on managing the bakery's sudden popularity. Lisa and I worked 14-hour days to meet demand. I rushed to hire 2 additional part-time employees, training them between serving customers and producing enough inventory to avoid selling out by mid-afternoon. On the 10th day after the article's publication, the bell above the door chimed during a rare afternoon lull. I looked up from the register to find James standing awkwardly in my bakery, wearing a crisp button-down and carrying a leather portfolio that seemed wildly out of place among the rustic wooden tables and mismatched vintage chairs. "Impressive place," he offered, surveying the space with the calculating gaze I recognized from childhood. He was assessing value, not aesthetics. "Thanks," I replied neutrally. "What brings you downtown? Fisher and Morgan's offices are across the river." James shifted his weight. "Thought I'd see what all the fuss is about. Dad's been talking about your article non-stop." "That's a change." "Look, Ruby," he said, dropping his voice and leaning over the counter. "I actually came to talk business. You've got something good here, but you're thinking too small." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. With the right strategy, you could turn this into a multi-location operation, maybe even a franchise model down the road. I've taken the liberty of drafting some preliminary projections. He opened his portfolio, revealing spreadsheets and market analysis documents. "Who said I want multiple locations? Don't you want to grow to maximize the potential?" "I want to bake," I said simply. "I want to create recipes that mean something to people. I want quality, not quantity." James looked genuinely confused. "But you could do both. With proper systems in place, you could standardize production while maintaining quality control." Before I could respond, a customer entered, giving me a welcome excuse to step away from the conversation. As I prepared their order, I watched James from the corner of my eye, noting how out of place he seemed in the warm, flower-dusted world I had created. When I returned to the counter, James was checking his phone with a furrowed brow. "Everything okay?" I asked, more out of habit than genuine concern. He hesitated before answering. "Just work stuff. Things are a bit complicated at the firm right now. Restructuring." Something in his tone caught my attention. James, who had always projected absolute confidence, suddenly seemed uncertain. It was such an unfamiliar expression on my brother's face that I momentarily forgot my resentment. "Restructuring how?" "It's nothing," he dismissed quickly. "Look, Mom and Dad want to have dinner this weekend. Saturday at 7, their place. They want to discuss your business opportunity." "My business is not an opportunity for the family," I replied, irritation returning. "It's my livelihood that I built without any help from any of you." "Just come to dinner, Ruby," James sighed. "At least hear them out." I agreed, primarily to end the conversation, though a small wounded part of me still craved family validation, despite everything. James left with a promise to text the details, his portfolio unopened on my counter. Saturday evening arrived all too quickly. I closed the bakery at 6, leaving cleanup to my staff for once, and drove to my parents' house for the first time in months. The familiar Tudor-style home with its manicured lawn seemed smaller, somehow less imposing than in my childhood memories. My mother greeted me with an enthusiastic hug that felt performative. "There's our celebrity baker." The dining room table was set with the good china and honour previously reserved for holidays and James's achievements. My father emerged from his study offering a firm handshake, as if we were business associates rather than family. "Quite an operation you've built," he said, his tone suggesting surprise. "Your mother and I drove by yesterday. The line was out the door." "That's pretty normal since the article," I explained, accepting the glass of wine my mother pressed into my hand. James arrived 10 minutes late, looking uncharacteristically dishevelled. His normally perfect hair was slightly mussed, and his shirt had a coffee stain barely concealed by his sport coat. More telling was the absence of his Rolex, replaced by a simpler timepiece. Dinner began pleasantly enough, with my mother asking specific questions about the bakery, showing more interest than she had in the previous 6 years combined. My father listened attentively, occasionally nodding with what appeared to be genuine approval. It felt surreal, this sudden reversal, as if I'd stepped into an alternate reality where my family had supported my dreams all along. The facade cracked when dessert was served. My mother had purchased a cake from a high-end grocery store chain, rather than asking me to bring something from my own bakery. Now about the business opportunity. My father began as we finished our cake, which was cloyingly sweet and obviously mass-produced. Your mother and I have been discussing the potential for Sweet Reverie, as have James and I, he continued. We think there's tremendous growth potential if we approach this as a family enterprise. I set down my fork. What exactly does that mean? We'd form a proper corporation, he explained, slipping into his business presentation voice. You'd maintain creative control of the product line, of course. James would handle the financial and expansion strategy. I have contacts in commercial real estate who could help secure favorable locations for additional storefronts. And what exactly would this corporation look like in terms of ownership? I asked, already knowing the answer. We'd need to work out the details, but as the family providing the expansion capital, we'd naturally hold a controlling interest. Say 60% to start. The audacity was breathtaking. So you want to own most of my business after contributing nothing to its creation. Now, Ruby, my mother interjected, don't be dramatic. We're talking about taking what you've built to the next level. It's an opportunity. An opportunity for whom? I countered. I've been running Sweet Reverie for nearly a year without a single word of encouragement from any of you. Not one of you showed up for my opening day. Now that a magazine has decided I'm worth noticing, suddenly it's a family enterprise. The past is the past, my father dismissed with a wave. We're looking toward the future. A future where you profit from my hard work. James cleared his throat. Ruby, be reasonable. You're a baker, not a businesswoman. You need our expertise to scale properly. Something inside me snapped at his condescension. Years of dismissed dreams, minimized accomplishments, and patronizing advice coalesced into a white-hot fury. I am both a baker and a businesswoman, I said, my voice steady, despite the anger pulsing through me. I wrote my own business plan. I negotiated my own lease. I designed my own space. I built my own customer base. I created my own signature products, and I did it all while being told by everyone in this room that I would fail. I stood up, pushing my chair back from the table. I don't need your expertise, and I certainly don't need your validation now that it's convenient for you to offer it. Don't be hasty, my father cautioned. You've had a bit of local success, but sustainability is another matter entirely. The restaurant industry is volatile. It's a bakery, Dad. After an entire year, you still can't even get that right. My mother reached for my arm. Ruby, you're being ungrateful. We're only trying to help. Ungrateful, I repeated incredulously. What exactly should I be grateful for? The complete lack of support, the constant comparison to James, the dismissal of my career as a hobby. We always supported you, she insisted, tears forming in her eyes. We just worried. No, you didn't worry. You judged. There's a difference. James stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. This is ridiculous. We're offering you a pathway to real success, and you're throwing a tantrum like a child. I turned to him, seeing through his bluster to something I'd never noticed before, fear. My supremely confident brother was afraid. What happened at Fisher & Morgan, James? I asked directly. You're not wearing your Rolex. Your shoes are scuffed. You arrived in a lift instead of your BMW. What's really going on? The colour drained from his face. Nothing you need to concern yourself with. He's taking a sabbatical, my father interjected quickly, reassessing his options. You got fired, didn't you? I realised aloud. The silence that followed confirmed my suspicion. The golden child had fallen from grace, and suddenly my modest success looked like a potential lifeboat. I'm sorry that happened, I said, and meant it despite everything. But Sweet Reverie is not your backup plan. It's my primary plan, the one you all mocked. And I'll be damned if I'll sign away control to people who couldn't even show up to see if I succeeded or failed. I gathered my purse and headed for the door, ignoring my mother's tearful protests and my father's attempts at negotiation. James followed me to the porch, catching my arm as I reached my car. Ruby, wait, it's not what you think. Isn't it? You need a win right now, and I'm suddenly convenient. It's more complicated than that. It always is with this family, I replied gently, removing his hand from my arm. Good luck with your job search, James. I mean that sincerely. I drove away from my childhood home, feeling simultaneously hollowed out and lightened. The confrontation had been painful but necessary, lancing a wound that had festered for years. For the first time, I had defended my choices without apology or qualification. Instead of going home, I drove to Sweet Reverie. The bakery was dark and quiet, smelling of yeast and sugar. I unlocked the door and slipped inside, not turning on the lights. In the dim glow from street lamps filtering through the windows, I sat at a corner table and breathed in the space I had created. This was mine. Not my family's, mine, and for the first time that felt entirely sufficient. 3 weeks passed without contact from my family. I threw myself into work, expanding the memory lane concept with seasonal variations and local ingredients. Sweet Reverie's popularity continued to grow, with weekend lines now a consistent feature. I hired 2 more staff members and began training Lisa to handle some of the baking, freeing me to focus on creative development and business strategy. The silence from my family was simultaneously painful and peaceful. Though I stood by everything I'd said at that disastrous dinner, the finality of the rupture left an ache that surfaced in quiet moments. I found myself checking my phone for messages that never came, then feeling angry at myself for still seeking their approval. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Amanda stopped by with news. "I'm opening my own place," she announced without preamble, sliding into a seat at the counter. "Just signed the lease this morning." "Amanda, that's fantastic," I exclaimed, genuinely thrilled for my mentor. "We're what concept?" "Small plates craft cocktails. Focus on local ingredients and global techniques. It's in the Arts District, about 10 blocks from here. Downtown's becoming quite the food destination," I observed, pouring her a cup of coffee. "Thanks in part to pioneers like you," she replied, raising her mug in salute. "Speaking of which, how are things since the family showdown?" I sighed, wiping down the already clean counter. Radio silence. "I think I finally burned that bridge for good." "Sometimes bridges need burning," she said philosophically. Then with uncharacteristic hesitation, "But I should tell you, I ran into your brother yesterday at the farmer's market," my hand stilled on the counter. "James at a farmer's market. Buying vegetables like a regular person," Amanda confirmed with a slight smile. "He asked about you." "What did he want?" "Mostly to know if you were okay. He seemed genuinely concerned, not scheming." I absorbed this information silently, unsure how to process it. "Also," Amanda continued, "he mentioned your dad had some health issue. Nothing critical apparently, but he thought you should know." The news sent a jolt of alarm through me, immediately followed by resentment that I was hearing this secondhand. Did he say what kind of health issue? Just that your dad had a minor cardiac event, whatever that means in doctor speak. That evening after closing, I called the hospital where my father would most likely have been treated and was informed that Howard Lancaster had indeed been admitted 3 days earlier, but had since been discharged. Relief mingled with hurt. He could have been seriously ill, and no one had thought to call me directly. The next morning, I arrived at Sweet Reverie earlier than usual, unable to sleep with thoughts of my father's health and my family's estrangement circling in my mind. To my surprise, James was waiting outside 2 coffee cups from a chain shop in hand. "Brought reinforcements," he said, offering 1 cup. "Though I'm sure yours is better." I accepted the peace offering and unlocked the door, letting us both inside. James looked different, more casual in jeans and a simple button-down, less polished, but somehow more genuine. "Dad had a mild heart attack," he stated directly as we sat at a table. "Not serious enough for surgery, but enough for a wake-up call. They put in a stent. He's home now on medication and a strict diet that's making him absolutely miserable. Why didn't anyone call me?" James had the grace to look ashamed. "Mum wanted to, but Dad wouldn't let her. Pride, I guess. Or maybe he thought you wouldn't care." "Of course I would care. He's still my father regardless of our differences." "I know that." James sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I told them they were being idiots. That's why I'm here now." We sat in silence for a moment, the early morning light casting long shadows across the empty cafe. "I got laid off," James finally admitted. "Wasn't just me whole department got cut after a merger. But it was still a shock. First time in my life I wasn't the golden boy." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "Don't be. It's been enlightening. Turns out I hated that job. Spent 10 years chasing something because it looked good on paper, made Dad proud, checked all the right boxes. Never once asked myself if I actually enjoyed it." The revelation hung between us, a rare moment of vulnerability from my perpetually composed brother. "What will you do now?" I asked. Teaching maybe. Economics at the community college. The pay's nothing special, but I did some guest lectures last year and actually liked it. Felt like I was contributing something real. He smiled wryly. Might need some pointers on living within a more modest budget. I could teach you how to bake, I offered half joking. God no, I'd burn water, but I am sorry, Ruby, for everything, for not coming to your opening, for the years of condescension, for that awful dinner. You were right about all of it. The apology so unexpected and unqualified caught me off guard. This was a James I barely recognized, humble, reflective, genuine. I'd like to see Dad, I said after a moment. No business talk, no agenda, just as his daughter. He'd like that even if he won't admit it, James replied. Want to go this afternoon? I can drive you? Later that day, James picked me up at Sweet Reverie in a modest used sedan that further confirmed his changed circumstances. We drove to our parents' home in companionable silence, the tension between us not entirely gone, but significantly diminished. My father was in his recliner when we arrived, looking smaller and paler than I remembered. An array of pill bottles lined the side table, along with a water glass and a heart-monitoring device. My mother hovered nearby, her usual perfect appearance, somewhat disheveled from caregiving duties. When he saw me, my father straightened slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing his face before he composed himself. Ruby, this is unexpected. James told me what happened, I said, taking a seat across from him. I wanted to see how you're doing. Just a minor setback. I'll be back on the golf course in no time. But the bravado rang hollow, undermined by the fear visible in his eyes. For the first time, I saw my father as simply human, vulnerable, aging mortal. Not the all-knowing patriarch who had loomed large in my childhood, but just a man facing his own limitations. The doctor says you need to reduce stress, my mother interjected, adjusting his blanket unnecessarily, and follow the diet. The diet is punishment worse than the heart attack, he grumbled. I could help with that, I offered. There are ways to make heart-healthy food taste good. My father regarded me with genuine curiosity. You'd do that after everything. You're still my dad. Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a recognition. I've been thinking a lot these past few days. When you're faced with your own mortality, priorities clarify quickly. He reached for my hand, an uncharacteristically demonstrative gesture. I was wrong, Ruby, about your bakery, about what success looks like. I was measuring everything against a very narrow definition of achievement. How would you need to rest? My mother cautioned, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional tenor of the conversation. I'm resting, Diane. I'm also finally saying what needs to be said. He turned back to me. I'm proud of what you've built, Ruby. Genuinely proud. No conditions, no suggestions for improvement, just proud. The words I'd waited years to hear washed over me simultaneously, healing and highlighting the depth of the wound their absence had created. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. Thank you, Dad. That means a lot. In the kitchen later, helping my mother prepare a heart-healthy dinner, we began our own tentative reconciliation. Unlike my father's direct approach, hers came through small admissions between chopping vegetables and measuring ingredients. I worried so much about you, she confessed carefully, slicing tomatoes. The restaurant industry seems so unstable, so difficult. I wanted something easier for you. It is difficult, I acknowledged, but it's also where I belong. I see that now. The way you handle food, the care you take, it's clearly your calling. I just didn't understand it before. We worked side by side, rebuilding our relationship through the shared language of food preparation. By the time we sat down to dinner, a fragile peace had been established. Not perfect, not complete, but a beginning. 2 years after opening Sweet Reverie, I organised an anniversary celebration. The bakery had grown beyond my initial vision, now employing 8 staff members and offering an expanded menu that included weekend brunch service. Downtown's renaissance was in full swing, with our block now home to a thriving collection of independent businesses. For the celebration, I transformed the cafe into a reception space featuring a display of photographs documenting Sweet Reverie's evolution. There were images of the empty storefront before renovation, the chaotic construction phase, the nervous excitement of opening day, and countless moments of joy captured with customers and staff. Central to the display was a large portrait of Nana Sarah, in her kitchen flour dusting her hands as she kneaded dough. Beside it, I placed her handwritten recipe book in a glass case, open to the page featuring her blackberry cake, the first memory lane creation that had helped define Sweet Reverie's identity. The guest list included regular customers, neighbouring business owners, and the staff who had become a second family. Daniel arrived with his wife, proudly pointing out how his vision for the neighbourhood had materialised. Amanda came between lunch and dinner service at her own successful restaurant, bringing a bottle of champagne for a private toast. Most significantly, my family attended not just as guests, but as active participants. My mother baked cookies using one of my recipes, proudly setting them among the professional offerings. My father, now recovered and embracing a healthier lifestyle, engaged genuinely with other guests, telling anyone who would listen how his daughter had seen the potential in this area before anyone else. James arrived with surprising news. He had accepted a full-time teaching position at the community college where I had studied culinary arts, finding unexpected fulfillment in education rather than finance. The irony wasn't lost on either of us, but there was no bitterness in our laughter about it. The celebration extended beyond Sweet Reverie's commercial success to honour the personal growth it had catalysed. In pursuing my passion despite resistance, I had not only built a thriving business, but also discovered a strength and confidence that transformed my relationship with my family and myself. During a quiet moment in the festivities, Lisa approached me with nervous excitement. "I've been saving," she confided. "I want to open my own place eventually, like you did. Do you think I could talk to you about it sometime? Get your advice?" I saw in her eyes the same determination and hope that had driven me forward against all discouragement. "Of course," I replied, feeling the circle completing itself. "I'd be honoured to help however I can." Later that evening, after the last guests had departed, I found myself alone in the bakery, savouring the peaceful aftermath of celebration. On the wall behind the counter hung a simple framed quote, installed that morning as my personal tribute to the journey. "The key ingredient is to follow your heart, even when others can't yet see where it's leading you." Sweet Reverie had become more than a business. It was a testament to perseverance, a platform for creativity, and proof that success comes in many flavours. Most importantly, it had become a place where I could truly be myself, undiluted and unapologetic. As I prepared to leave, I paused before Nana Sarah's portrait, imagining what she would say if she could see what her encouragement had helped create. I like to think she would simply nod with that knowing smile of hers, unsurprised by what happens when passion meets persistence. Have you ever had to fight for a dream that others dismissed? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. How did you find the strength to keep going when those closest to you couldn't see your vision? If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and triumph. And remember, sometimes the sweetest success is the kind you bake yourself against all odds and expectations. Thank you for listening, and may you have the courage to follow your own heart wherever it leads.